I was on the phone with my father-in-law last night. Crystal and Solomon took a trip down to see her mom and stepdad, Cliff, and Mama T. And Cliff and I were talking because he had cooked some hens. He's a good cook. And he wanted to make sure that I knew that he was sending a hen back for me. He always sends some food back for me. And we talked a little bit about a basketball game that was on television. But inevitably, he and I began to talk about God. Because for both of us, God has brought us a mighty long way. And God has made a way out of no way. And so even though our stories are different, there are quite some similarities in our story about how we owe everything to God. Everything. And so it brings us great joy to talk about that. And he said, Joe, what kind of word you got tomorrow? And so I began to talk about the story of Jesus in the desert and the wilderness and the Israelites in the wilderness and how it's Lent, and we'll talk about the wilderness and moving through the wilderness and where God is in that. And I said, well, hold on, Cliff. You tell me what the word is for tomorrow, and that will be the word for tomorrow. And he said, all right, Joe, the word is let go and let God. So that's the word for us, church. Let go and let God. Say it with me. Let go and let God. Sounds easy. Let go and let God. Why? Because all of life is in the love of God. There is nothing outside of the love of God. Thus we can always trust that God is all we need. Thus we have all we need in this life. Let go and let God. We have the wilderness stories of Jesus and the Israelites, Jesus being tempted, the Israelites in some sense being tempted as well. Let go and let God. All Jesus needed was his awareness of the love of God. The Israelites, all they needed was the awareness of the love of God. And we've all been through the wilderness, have we not? Some of us are in the wilderness this morning. Perhaps we're grieving. Perhaps we're struggling with sadness or depression, anxiety. Perhaps we're just struggling with the ways of the world. Perhaps we experienced some racism this week again, or some homophobia again, and we're tired. We're tired of it. Or some ageism, as we talked about this morning in formation. We go through the wilderness. Perhaps we're going through a sickness. We all know that, well, we don't all know that Hal's husband, Roger, died on Saturday. If you didn't get the email, it's probably in spam. Roger had just retired as an Episcopalian priest, and they were looking forward to life together in retirement. And Roger's health began to decline quickly. So Hal is in the wilderness. Perhaps we as a church family can help him to know how loved he is by God in the midst of all of this. Let go and let God, because no matter what we're going through in life, church, no matter what the wilderness is, nothing is outside of the love of God. That all of life is in God, and God is in all of life. As Merton writes, it's mercy within mercy, within mercy, within mercy. Everlasting mercy. Who is God? Everlasting mercy. We live our lives in the grace of God. We journey through the grace of God, and we shall return to the grace of God. Let go and let God. Let God love us. Let God love us through the wilderness, because we are all beloved children of the living God. In Hawaii, Solomon and I, and we still do it here as well, but we would, after dinner, we would go outside and just walk around and play, and I kind of gauged where he was and what he wanted to do, but there was this huge field across the street from the church and the house where we lived, and sometimes we would take Koa and just let Koa run, and we would run around, and I try to get him to run as much as possible. If you know Solomon, just go, buddy, go. And I remember one evening, it was getting dark, and I knew that he needed just a little bit more so he would be ready for bedtime. And it was getting a little dark, and I said, son, why don't we go over to the old cemetery? It was an old cemetery nearby. Really, I love cemeteries, and there it was. And he was kind of hesitant. He said, I don't know, Daddy. I said, it's going to be okay, buddy. Let's go. We'll go over there and get some more sticks, because it was a good ways away, and I knew that it would be just enough to kind of top off the night. And so we began walking across the field, and it's getting darker and getting darker, and we reached the cemetery, and we're walking around, and we're doing something, playing. He's getting sticks, and then it gets dark. And Solomon kind of looks at me, and if you know Solomon, it's hard to get him to hold your hand. He doesn't want to hold your hand. Let me go. But boy, he grabbed my hand. And we walked back across the field a few hundred yards back towards the church. We're walking across the grass, and it's dark. And he's holding my hand tight. He's not saying a word. And if you know Solomon, he's usually saying something, right? I mean, he's a thoughtful boy, but he also likes to talk. And it wasn't until we got close to the church that he began to open up a little bit. Oh, Daddy. And he kind of loosened up my hand a little bit. He said, Daddy, that was scary. I said, I know, son, but I had you. I was holding your hand. And I wasn't going to let it go. Daddy was with you. Doesn't matter what we're going through, church. Doesn't matter what the wilderness is. God will never let us go. God will never, ever, ever, ever let us go. We can let go and let God.